Just bear with us for a minute or so, trying to bring the special rapporteur on Skype. How do I do this one? Switch it on. Good morning, Yanghee. Hang on, we are not getting your... Okay, everyone can say hello to you now, and but we need to get your voice up.
Okay, I'm trying to...
We got you, so you've got 10 minutes, and then Q&A for another 10 minutes. So I don't think you need any introduction, so I'll shut up, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hi, thank you for having me, and it's a pity that I couldn't join you in person in Berlin. The place you're having this very important conference is so appropriate for a topic like what you're discussing today. I would just like to bring you up to date with some of the situation in Myanmar and the conditions and the situations of those people who have recently fled from the Rakhine state. As some of you might know, I've started my mandate since 2014 in June. This was during the previous government, and consequently, after a year or so, so what we call the democratic elected government came in, and we had such high hopes. I had very high hopes, and I still have hopes remaining for the road to Myanmar in the transition and the full democratization of the people in Myanmar. However, sadly to say, when we look at Rakhine State, and of course, if I have the opportunity during the Q&A, that I might be able to touch a little bit on some of the other states. The situation in Rakhine has not improved at all. On the other hand, contrary, I have seen it consistently decline, the situation of the people in central Rakhine Sittwe area, of people who are living in Angmenlar, the only quarters of Rohingya, and of course the situation of 120,000 plus IDPs that still remain in camps. And the northern Rakhine state has consistently become very challenging and almost to a point where access has been very limited to outsiders. But I'd like to say that in 2016, 2017, early part of those two periods, I was beginning to see some of the population of the Rohingyas and the Buddhist Rakhine communicating with each other, because they realized that they had been neighbors and they needed each other for instance, business, and to also work on the farmland or even help out with fishing. And I was very encouraged to see that happening. And there's people in the Rakhine state, both the Rakhine Buddhists and Rakhine Rohingyas, have expressed the feeling that maybe it's the hardliners from either end that have created this problem, that they find that it would be okay for many of them, or the ones that I spoke with, to resume life in peaceful coexistence. Unfortunately, as we all know, on October 9, there was this attack by the RSF, and which really started to drastically change the situation in Rakhine, and really making the lives of Rohingyas as well as Kaman Muslims very, very difficult in Rakhine state. Consequently, Many had fled, as we know, about 80,000 people had fled in the aftermath of the October 9th, 2016 incident. I visited Cox's Bazar in 2017 in February, and I spoke to about 100 refugees at that time, recalling their accounts of what made them flee and the situation that made them flee their hometowns. What I've heard repeatedly, and if some of you have the opportunity to visit my website, the Special Rapporteur website, there is a link to a page called Flickr page. I have uploaded some pictures that I took personally of northern Rakhine in 2017, January, just after the October 9th incident of 2016. And I've taken some photos of refugees with their permission and blacked out the eyes of people so that people's faces would not be easily identified. But I was struck to hear from the people at that time in Cox's Bazar that all they wanted was to be treated equal, to be recognized as citizens of Myanmar, that they all wanted to go back to Myanmar because after all, they said, it's our home, it's the home of our parents, our grandparents. We've lived here for generations. That's where I have my friends. But most of them told me, if not all, said, but we want justice. And I asked them, what do you mean by justice? And they said, we just want to be treated as citizens and treated as equal human beings. There was not a single account that I heard which is not harrowing. And we've heard and seen many of this post August 25th of 2017. But at my first visit after the October 9th incident of 2016, the refugees in Cox's Bazar told me the same pattern of the authorities, the security guards came and separated the women and men from each other, took the men to the forest, took the ladies into their homes, into the school or homes or some building, and they started to abuse and bring about a very terrible physical harm to their bodies. I talked with a mother, and this is a repeating story that's been repeated throughout the media and other reports, that one family had, she heard her son screaming in the house. And at first she thought everybody had escaped the house, but she discovered that one of her sons had not escaped, so she had to go back in and rescue him from the house. And the child had suffered multiple burns, and that particular picture is on my website. One woman lost an eye because of due to the fire caused by the security forces, and she had to walk to Bangladesh without that vision in one eye. A boy with hearing impairment was desperately making gesture to tell me how his parents died in front of him. I heard allegation after allegation of horrific events like slitting of throats, indiscriminate shooting, setting alight houses with people tied up inside, and throwing very young toddlers into the fire, as well as gang rapes and other sexual violence. In that Flickr website, you will see one very small toddler boy who had been rescued from the fire, and he had suffered many wounds to his face, And it's clearly obvious that these scars were very recent scars when I took them in February of 2017. Well, after this incident in October 9th, the villagers were instructed by the security forces to either dismantle their own homes, arguing that the structures had been built without permission, and yet they were not given an alternative place. And also, all of the fences were dismantled, and it was very odd to see house after house with no fences, just a door standing. This was so that the security forces and other police border guard forces can have a clear view inside the house, which really left some of our female Rohingya women and young girls deprived of their privacy when they had to wash or bathe. It is a tragic irony that after implementing these policies and rules that discriminate and prosecute this population, more cruel actions were taken against this population, generally in the name of national security and protection of state sovereignty. Then I would like to touch a little bit on the lead up to the October 25th attacks and the clearance operation that took place in response to those attacks. Already on 11 October 2017, I expressed alarm over reports that a full army battalion has flown in to Rakhine State to help local authorities to boost up security in the region. This was undoubtedly a cause for major concern in Rakhine forming. In the few days before 25th August, security forces imposed further restrictions on the Rohingya from having access to markets, medical facilities, schools, and religious sites. And it was really troubling to hear from Rohingya refugees that security elements were conducting pretext detentions of Rohingya. They were seizing sharp farming tools, machetes, and even kitchen cutlery from Rohingya homes, and they would stop and interrogate Rohingya in homes or out of their homes while they were walking between towns and villages. So it was the intent of this exercise was so that no household was left with any sharp utensils or objects that could be used in violent form. Well, we all know what happened in 25th of August. You know, it was a terrible attacks were carried out. Armed men, ARSA launched attacks on 30 police posts and killing at least 10 armed officers. At least 59 that we know of the armed attackers were killed. And this was all immediately after was the military, the security forces immediately embarked in what is commonly known as security operations in the 3 townships of Butidong, Mongdo, and Ratidong. Well, during my second visit in Cox's Bazar, I was completely overwhelmed to see that it was a complete different landscape from what I had seen in 2017. And if those of you, for any of you who have been to Cox's Bazar any time, or it would be, the pictures that you see in media reports does not give you it doesn't really capture the massiveness of the settlements, how desperate people had been and it looked like there were settlements beyond the border, beyond the horizons is what I would say. And these settlements are in various precarious situations because they had to cut woods into hills, and with the rain season that will be coming soon, not to mention the monsoon rains nor the cyclone season, those shelters would be subject to landslides, floods, and it would be a disastrous situation. We know that this current situation of the Rohingyas is the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the 21st century. The settlement, the refugee settlement in Cox's Bazar, is clearly the largest refugee settlement in the world. Bangladesh has been very, very generous in providing land and shelter and services for the refugees in Cox's Bazar. During my visit, it became clear that the Rohingya population will not be moving from Bangladesh anytime soon. And this led to serious concerns about what will happen to them in the short term, the midterm, and the long run. We all know of the repatriation discussions, the agreement, the final physical agreement, and continued discussions on repatriation. Talks of repatriation at this time are clearly premature. While the government of Bangladesh had made it clear to me that no refugee would be forced back to Myanmar, I remain concerned about whether any safeguards exist to ensure that any returns are truly voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable. I saw great anxiety and fear when I spoke to refugees about the prospect of returning to Myanmar. I would like to end my intervention by saying that the situation, the violence, and the aftermath of the violence in Rakhine State is the most horrific that any human being should be allowed to see. But the situation is not that different in other ethnic areas, such as the Kachin, Shan, the Chin areas, the Kaya areas, and the Kayin areas. And many people in those areas have fled to other countries. Mostly they remain in the Thai-Myanmar border. They've been there for decades. They cannot go back because of continued conflict. They have no land to go back to. Their villages have been changed to another name. There's no place they can effectively call a home village, a place of origin that they can go back. This all happened during the decades of the military junta, when the military junta decided to, quote unquote, Burmanize the entire country. So we have to be cognizant about and not lose track of what's happening in Rakhine. But let's also remember that similar situations have happened in other parts of the ethnic areas in Rakhine, and they are still happening in those areas too. Thank you for your attention, and I would be more than happy to answer your questions.
Yeah. I think we're going to have only 5 minutes for Q&A because we're running really late. So let me just collect 3 questions and then relay them to Special Rapporteur. The lady in red, and then Han Yang-wei. David Kulger. Anyone else? Penny Green. 3. Then we close the floor. Please.
Sri Lanka and have seen it myself. I have a basic question. You just described interviews with the refugees who say, we want to go back to our homes, we want to be treated equal, which sort of clashes with what we heard from Margarete Bause and from you. People should not be forced back. Now, I don't see how these two things can be squared. How can people go back? They obviously want to go back. They don't want to stay in Bangladesh. How can they go back if they are not forced back? And who would force them? I mean, would Bangladesh force them back? You just said they won't. Who would force them back? So do you have any idea how that can be squared and how they can go back in safety? Thank you.
Can you wait for two? Sorry, can you wait for two more questions and then
Sure.
David?
David Kilgore from Canada. The attacks on those police stations on August 25th were so catastrophic. Is it possible, like Hitler's Reichstag fire, those were done by the army, in fact, triggered by the army?
Professor Penny Green, can you pass the mic this way? Matthew, please.
Hello, Penny Green, Director of the International State Crime Initiative, and thank you very much, Yanghee. That was, we all admire greatly the work you've done under very difficult conditions. My question was exactly the same, about whether or not the attacks by, the alleged attacks by ARSA were in fact false flag attempts in order to initiate. We don't have a lot of evidence, and I'm wondering, have you seen evidence apart from that provided by the Myanmar state, which suggests that these attacks were in fact independent and organised by this so-called organisation, the Arakan Salvation Rohingya Army? Thanks very much.
Yanghee, it's yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me tackle the second question first about repatriation. Everybody wants to go back to their home. That's the basic nature of human beings. But unless conditions are conducive back home, it is not possible for them to go back home. Being conducive meaning that all the returns have to be voluntary, the consent has to be made, all the information has to be given to each and every individual refugee. It has to be safe. The safety has to be guaranteed. It has to be under the condition that they go back in dignity to their places of origin, and that this repatriation will be sustainable. By meaning sustainable, it means, and I have emphasized time and time over again, that all the repressive policies, laws, legislations, and local directives and practices have to be dismantled before anyone can go back. Otherwise, even after they go back voluntarily, with the laws in place, with the policies in place, with the practice in place, and all the other local directives and practices that have discriminated this population for decades, it will not be a sustainable return. Now, who will oversee this? What can we do? Isn't this conflictual? No, I think this is why the international community has to continue to put pressure on the Myanmar side. Bangladesh has agreed that they will not send them back. But the agreement, the bilateral agreement that the two countries have made, they are keen on ending this repatriation process in a few years. Now, I don't see how this could be possible because Myanmar does not allow any international agencies, humanitarian agencies or refugee agencies to cooperate with during the repatriation process. The two questions of the first and the third question is, and I lost my train of thought, but Dr. Zarni, can you just give me some keywords?
The ARSA, sorry. On the ARSA, whether it was a false flag staged by other forces.
I get it. I don't want to be quoted or taken in the wrong direction, because we will never know the truth. And this is why Myanmar needs to accept the fact-finding mission, accept my mandate, myself, to come and visit, and all the international media and journalists, as well as other international organizations, to come and visit Northern Rakhine and even other parts of Rakhine, to see and to also conduct an impartial, international, credible investigation into all the crimes. Having said that, the security intelligence in Myanmar is very, very advanced. And I was very surprised how the massive attacks were actually allowed to go ahead. And as I said earlier, we will only know until there has been a full-fledged, independent, international investigation around both October 9th of 2016 and 25th of August 2017 attacks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yanghee Lee, for being with us. It was a very important and interesting intervention. And we will go on now with the panel, the first panel, which is called or entitled